All right, so we talked a little bit about the treatments and such for some of the ACLS conditions. Let's go into a little more detail about the actual conditions. So when we talk about cardiac arrest, so cardiac arrest, the heart stops beating we talked about there's 10 reversible causes listed in your book. I'm certain there's more than that, but they're rare. So cardiac arrest, the heart stops beating. And so when we talk about the one, we always talk about the classic heart attack, which is your coronary thrombosis. And that's where there's basically a clot in the heart, in the blood vessel of the heart. So coronary, if you see the term coronary, refers to the heart. And then thrombosis, when you break that apart, osis means condition of and thrombo means clot. So condition of a clot in the heart vessel, specifically one of the coronary arteries. And the artery for the coronary artery comes right off of the aorta. It's one of the first vessels that come off is the coronary artery. Comes out and blood comes through to try to feed the heart muscle with the oxygenation and nutrients, and there is a clot right in the way. By having that clot right there in the way, stops the blood flow, and everything distal or further on down from that artery starts to die off. When it starts to die off, that's your myocardial ischemia, and then when it's completely dead, that's when you have myocardial infarction, or MI. So myocardial ischemia is your classic angina, chest pain. You know, that's where the classic picture is the old guy, 50-something years old, he's doing something, some sort of exertional activity. He says, oh my goodness, I have this chest pain. He feels like it's a squeezing pain. There's an elephant sitting on my chest, and the pain radiates. So where does the pain of myocardial ischemia, where does that radiate to? The left arm and up into the jaw. Very good. So the heart is generally on the left side of the chest. It's kind of in the middle, but a little bit to the left. So you'll feel that pain going down the arm and up into the jaw. That's your classic myocardial ischemia or angina. Now, in that case, the person has ischemic chest pain. They're unstable. That's one of the symptoms of instability. But they're not dead. They don't have cardiac arrest. They're still alert, they're still talking to you, maybe they're a little bit out of breath. You try to take their blood pressure, maybe it might be high even if their blood pressure, because of the pain. Oxygenation might be a little bit low, I don't know. But the thing is they have their ischemic chest pain. And the reason why that happens, well, maybe it's just a partial blockage that suddenly kind of blocked up a little bit more. Maybe there was a little bit of what we call a vasospasm. The vessel starts to spasm or close up a little bit for whatever reason, and it causes an occlusion, and that heart muscle area is not getting enough blood flow, and it starts to die off. So why does that happen? Okay, so if we get a close-up look at this here coronary artery, people talk about, a high cholesterol diet. Okay, so if you eat a lot of fatty foods, you got lipids, and you'll have these plaques that start to develop within the walls of the coronary arteries. These plaques, over time, will get bigger and bigger for a variety of reasons. Maybe it's a poor diet, not enough exercise, some family predispositions to it. But as the plaques start to develop and build up more and more, you can also have interactions with what we call platelets. Remember from our first class, we talked about platelets are those little fragments or thrombocytes that are floating around in the blood. The platelets might recognize this as tissue damage, and they'll start to kind of go on there and they'll start to aggregate, and then they'll eventually form this thrombosis, the clot within that vessel itself. And so if it gets to be that severe, you have this here clot in the coronary artery, blocks the blood flow, and then it causes the heart to stop beating. Now, if it's only a partial, like say it's 90% occluded, only 10% of the blood flow is getting through, they're having this ischemic chest pain, or maybe they have some other symptoms. They go to the emergency room and say, oh my goodness, I'm having these chest pains, but they haven't gone into cardiac arrest. They could take them to the catheterization lab in the cardiology clinic and do a procedure to help open up that artery. You can also have that kind of same procedure following a successful resuscitation after CPR. Somebody's had cardiac arrest, and you determine after they've been resuscitated and they come back to life, you want to say, oh, maybe they had a coronary thrombosis. Let's send them to the cath lab to get that looked at. Now, for the cath lab, it's a special area of the hospital run by cardiology, where they'll put a catheter basically through the groin, through the major vessel here, the femoral, and it'll come back up through the major vessels. And this catheter is basically a long, thin wire, essentially, and they'll feed it through the vessel into the coronary arteries, okay? And they'll inject a contrast under live fluoroscopy or live X-ray, and they'll say, oh, here's the vessel that's occluded, because they can see that it's not the contrast isn't going all the way through. They say, oh, this is the one. So they'll feed that little wire through up to that point, and maybe there's a little balloon on the end of that, okay, right there, and they'll say, okay, that's where that spot is, and they'll expand the balloon and basically open that up, and they could do what's called placing a stent. A stent is just a little device that goes in there to kind of help keep it open. So it's basically like a little tube-like, or I guess it's a tube-like thing. So it goes into there, into this point. So remember this is three-dimensional, right? So it goes in there. They'll place a stent. So maybe you heard people say, "Oh, I had 3 stents placed," because they had 3 of their vessels were blocked. So they'll go and they'll place a stent to reperfuse. Okay, and so the key word there is reperfusion. Right? Because the blood was perfusing through, it was blocked, and then you're going to reperfuse it. So there's a few ways of saying that in your ACLS text, or maybe you'll hear or read about it. They'll say, oh, he had PCI done. PCI. Okay? Let me erase this real quick. So they say, oh, I had PCI. PCI stands for percutaneous intervention. PCI, percutaneous intervention, where you'll go in through the skin into the groin and back up to do this reperfusion therapy. Okay, so whatever it's called, whatever you might hear it, basically whenever you've gone through your mega code and you've resuscitated the person, you say, let's send them to the cath lab for PCI, or let's send them to the cath lab so they can get their cardiac catheterization done. Whatever, there's a few ways of calling it that. But that's your ultimate goal as you're trying to solve and fix the reversible cause of cardiac arrest of coronary thrombosis. Does that make sense? Any questions about that? Turn this part off.